Whereas in much of the democratic world, capitalism is associated with freedom, our nationalists associated capitalism with slavery because they essentially thought the British East India Company came to trade and stayed on to rule, so we must be suspicious of every foreigner with a briefcase because he's really the thin end of a neo-imperial wedge. And the assumption was that though they say they're coming to trade and to invest, what they really want to do is to rule you. Why? Because that's what the British East India Company did, which only goes to show that one of the lessons you learn from history is that sometimes history can teach you the wrong lessons. We ended up essentially subtracting India from the international trading system and from modern day capitalism. We had been a country with something like 27% of world trade in the beginning of the 19th century, according to the economic historian Angus Maddison. But by the end of British rule, we were down to about 2%. We managed to reduce that to 0.2% by 1991. And it was essentially because of our suspicion of capitalism and foreign trade and foreign investment. The result was that we ended up with a number of problems. We had bureaucrats rather than businessmen on the commanding heights of the Indian economy. And we spent much of the first, at least 4.5 decades after independence, attempting to regulate stagnation, subsidize unproductivity, and distribute poverty. And the result really came to a head with a major financial crisis in 1991, when we had to physically ship our gold, our stores and stocks of gold in government vaults to London to stand collateral for an IMF loan. And I think that was a major psychological blow, because we all know the place of gold in a family's sense of its own honor and its own financial well-being and moral well-being. And to see our gold going off to a foreign country must have been really humiliating. I think that's what broke the back of the old system. But more and more things became exempt. I think there were some salutary benefits to the country. Tremendous growth followed. It's with the liberalization that we went from what economist Rajkrishna called the Hindu rate of growth, chugging along at between 1% and 3%, when the rest of the Asian tigers were growing at 4 or 5 times that amount, or that speed. We started growing comfortably above 8, 9, even 10% some years between 1991 and 2008. And I think that showed that we were able to learn, fortunately, the right lessons from our own experience. A very close friend of mine from my high school days in Calcutta was a bit senior to me, so he'd already moved to Delhi, and I asked him what his father was doing now. And his father's job, his sole job in a major company, was to figure out ways of investing the company's legal profits in ways that would avoid the Monopolies and Restrictive Trade Practices Act. In other words, because they simply couldn't grow. Even though they had made profits legally by doing business, they wanted to put it into more production or whatever, but they couldn't under the laws. This gentleman's job was to figure out ways of investing company money, and I thought that was such a terrible indictment of our system. A second example came when I got an opportunity to go to the United States on a scholarship. Not only was the scholarship I got more than my father was earning to support a family of 5 in what he considered style, because in a highly protected economy and highly taxed economy, companies tended to reward their officials through perks rather than salaries, so salaries are very modest. So already the day I got my scholarship, I was earning more than my father, but I could only take $8 with me when I left the country. Another friend of my father's explaining that under the laws, he officially had to pay 103% tax. And that our tax system was created to encourage dishonesty, which I thought was a deeply searing indictment of the way in which we did our work. I thought it was extremely important that we should, in fact, create incentives for compliance. I do believe, as a liberal, that of course the state is entitled to collect taxes, but I believe they should be reasonable, and at the same time they should exist for the state to fulfill certain functions that only the state can fulfill. But when you create a highly protected economy, which gives you very little revenues from growth, and then you need to tax hardworking people in order to finance your government, you're making some very basic mistakes. And I think that all of these mistakes were only undone after 1991.